patience for just, the students, and, who acted badly and meanly. At times, it was like a switch, turn off and on. At times, it was Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I didn't know what to expect. Sometimes when I was really on edge, she would, and I would just feel, and I would take a breath and say, she, didn't get mad, and she actually was happy with me. Like one time I was sick, and she, she was very, very understanding. And in the spring, when apparently I had sometimes, not all the time because I didn't think of it all the time, but sometimes I talked in like a, pretend voice when I was in elementary for some reason. And I was very confused when she did not get mad at that, but she rather laughed at it, and she was excited. It's like she was kind of making a funny out of it, like, and she wasn't being, she wasn't being embarrassing. She was like, tell her, go tell, and, let's go tell the other teachers, and I was very, very confused. I did not know how to take it. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know how to think at that moment. But so anyway, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself still. So the first day I went there, and I was excited. I was eager to start. I was ready to start the day. I was excited to meet her. And the first day when I walked in, the first thing I noticed was, and she was probably standing at the sink, because there was a sink if you walked into the classroom. There was a sink along the side where you could wash your hands, and then there was a big, table with kind of like a, little, chair on one side of it and chairs around it. And there were all the desks lined up, and then her desk was over to the what side of the room was it at? That side, over to the west side of the room, so kind of the southwest corner of the room. She had glasses on. That was the first thing I noticed, which I did not expect. And maybe this is just coincidence, but sometimes when people do the slightest thing to change their appearance, their character changes, and I didn't care for this, because I barely got to know her, and I wanted to see her without the glasses, but I didn't say anything, just because why would I say that? I kind of had a little bit of disbelief, like, is this her, because this is not the person who was at the open house. But no, it was her, and I forgot how she sounded in her voice, so her voice sounded very different, and I can't remember how her voice sounded, but it's the type of voice. So if you know, and I'm going to make this comparison, if you know who Abby Lee Miller is, then you know that she has one of those voices that sticks with you, that kind of just, is kind of a bane, and kind of gets in your head, and, you remember it, and it, kind of, it's a little bit disturbing, it makes you uncomfortable. It's that type of voice. Um, so think along those types of terms. And when I cite Nance Bombs later on, then, oh my goodness, there really is a resemblance between Abby and my 5th grade teacher. And I wish that I watched the show Dance Moms sooner, because I would certainly be feeling an impact if I saw it then. So I sat down, got my stuff, sat down, at desks. We were in teams. There were 4 desks, and then maybe it was just my table, but there was another desk tied in, and I asked, when are we going to start? And she said, oh, let's, just I'll give you, a few moments to kind of chat a little bit, and then, then we'll start. And I was thinking, okay, so I kind of sat and maybe tried to attempt to say something, and then everybody was talking about their, getting to know each other again, talking about the summer vacation, the normal stuff. So then she had us sit down. She was up in her chair. We were sitting on the rug. She introduced herself. She introduced, just what was going to be happening, who she was, her rules, this and that. Mrs. Wilson, who was my associate, 4th grade, came in, and she said, for those of you who have siblings, raise your hand. And I did not know the meaning of siblings. I probably didn't know or forgot siblings. And I think that, just certain things were not as they were. It was kind of a change, and not exactly the Pozar, but well, anyway. But the thing that was interesting, and the thing that I agreed with, was out of all of the stuff she said, I only have one rule. She said that the rule was respecting yourself. Respect yourself, you respect others as well. I didn't have that many rules, because I would think that you would know all the other ones. Why should I have to go through? That was one of the things. And then I remember one day in the afternoon, she had us sit down again, chatted about bubble gum. When I went to middle school, you could not chew bubble gum, and and it's famous kind of all around, it's kind of forbidden. She allowed it. She allowed it in her classroom, and I'm not going to sit here and think, oh, what a revelation. No, because it's just bubble gum. She said, as long as you're not blowing bubbles, which I didn't even know how to blow bubbles, you could have it. That was her rule. And I was like, that's interesting. That is interesting. Okay. She read a story called First Day Jitters, which is like a children's story. And so then the morning continued. She talked about, the expectations for what the days would look like and things, and kind of hinted at us going to the Annette Nature Center, which would happen later, which is kind of a separate can of worms. We had lunch that day. I remember going out to the playground at Wilder before they, tore down the old one and put up the new one, which you can go and see now. I remember walking along the little pebbles, like in between the gravel and the grass, and kind of trying to balance myself. That afternoon, she used the word, resourceful, using the resources. That was kind of a thing that we had to, we were expected to do and had to accomplish in 5th grade. I remember sitting down with the reading lesson kind of thing, and she said, by the end of today, you're going to be sick and tired of hearing me talk in the morning. That's what she said. And there was a slight kind of getting mad at Zane. The first little thing that happened, which actually happened, in front of the class, do you want to, stay after on the first day or something? Oh, and I didn't, think much about that. That was like the least thing that happened. Yeah. So later that day, I, at the end of the day, I remember bumping into my 4th grade teacher and hugging her, and then I realized that I kind of missed her a little bit. And again, don't tell Shelley that. And I was feeling kind of a bittersweet feeling at the end of the day. I have to say that I did miss the 4th grade. It was the first day, so it would get better, and I would get more used to it, and so I did other things for the remainder of that afternoon, and then that evening we had chicken pot pie with a crust that did not taste very good. And when I was going to judge the taste, who did I have in my mind before I did that? My teacher in my mind while I was sitting at that table. Had the evening. Next morning was the second day, the summer day. And that was the day when we would switch. Which, the whole 5th grade thing was to prepare for middle school. So preparing for, the bigger thing. So that morning she had us sit down, like, she was sitting in her chair again, we were sitting on the rug, and she told us that we would be going over to 2 teachers, the first being Miss Brooks, who would be doing extra math lessons. The second teacher was Miss Jacobson, who would do science and social studies, but science to begin with, so it would kind of go back and forth. Zane was sitting right there, and he asked the question, is she going to take us to the moon? And my teacher made a comment. And I don't remember what it was, but it was along the lines of, really? No, that was disrespectful. It was something like that. It wasn't, and I don't know if it was exactly, 100% audible or not. But I think that my teacher was unprepared for us and how we would act. And when I say us, I'm not talking about myself. She was unprepared for how Zane would act and how everybody else would act. And I was unprepared for her and her, demeanor and everything. The day of the open house, I'm kind of jumping back and forth here. When I was in the driveway, I asked why. It's like, why can't she not be firm? And my mom said, well, if she's not firm, then everybody would be dishing around. Well, there was dishing around, and it was probably not enough as it was, but I hate to say that. Now, when we got to Mrs. Brooks and Miss Jacobson, who were over to the other sides of the building, so the green and the blue side of the building, when I first met Miss Brooks, when I first was in her class, I was a little intimidated at first. My first impressions were, what am I being thrown into? What have I gotten myself into? Because she was just kind of having like a jockey type of personality, and I just did not care for that. But very, very soon, she became nice. Her first name was Heidi, and I got to like her, and that was just her personality that I just did not expect at the beginning. And as I got to know her, I really, really liked her, and then I started wishing that I was with her and not my fifth grade teacher, who apparently was trained with the special ed area more, that I was kind of part of at the time. Then we switched over to Miss Jacobson, who had brown hair and who reminded me of Idina Menzel. She looked kind of like Idina Menzel. And the very, very first day, she had on a short navy blue shirt with tan, pants that were kind of, they came mostly down, and then flip-flops because it was summertime. And when I went into Mrs. Brooks' classroom, there was this other person there that, it was her, and I didn't know it was her until I went there. And so we stood along where the lockers were, because they were in the same place as my fifth grade room was. And she said, when she was taking attendance, you know who you are, so I'm going to start listing off names, and you can sit down. At maybe we could choose the place we were sitting or the place that she pointed at. She started listing names. We sat down. She got to, she introduced herself, and she said, I can be very nice and I can be fun, but I do understand that there was a time and and a place for that, and being serious and being, of course she would say something like that. And if I had to put them in order, she would be right between Miss Brooks over there. Well, no. She would be over here. Think of like a number line. Think of the positive and then the negative. Miss Jacobson would be right in the middle. So it progressed. Day 3, day 4, we did, kind of went back and forth and, did, science projects and looked at the, the different spheres later and did a variety of things, looked around and looked at different, and then, I didn't mention this, but on the second day, there was something called, it was an acronym for something, but it was called GROW or something, where we sat in a little, it was like a, trying to think, it was like in a big room, like kind of a multi-purpose room, which was blue. After, it was like, I think right before lunch where it was extra waiting practice. And we started out doing that, and then we just stopped and didn't do that anymore. Um, that day at recess, when, my associate was there and, standing outside, and I, usually sang because I was little and I was, you know, unique in that kind of way. She came out with like a dish that she was eating for lunch. I'm talking about, Miss Jacobson. She came out with this, this thing of pasta. Looked like it, pasta with like a bolognese sauce, and then, Mrs. Wilson, said, "Ooh, that looks good." Um, and then she said, "My dad made it," and I was kind of drawn to her in some way. And if my teacher, um, my fifth grade teacher, was very famous for saying the words, saying the phrases "figure it out" and "knock it off." She, her big word when people were talking or, just acting up would be "hey," and she would, scream it, kind of, I don't know. So kind of, bled into more, day after day after day. And one day in the month of September, it was early September, early to mid September, at the very end of the day, the first rampage happened.